ঠিক আছে। আজকে আমরা দুটো নতুন ট্যাকটিক শিখবো চেসে। আগের দিন আমরা লাস্ট চেস ক্লাসে করেছিলাম ফর্ক নিয়ে। In the last chess session, we discussed forks. Let's revisit that for a second. Forks are basically when you're hitting two things at once. So I'll show that with the white pieces. Just put our kings over there, like this. So right now the knight goes from here to here, and the knight at e2, the white knight at e2, is hitting both the queen and the rook. So this is called a fork. A fork can be with the knight, it can be with the bishop. This is also a fork because the bishop is hitting two things at once. So this is called a fork, and we discussed that last time. These are the three main tactics, we may call them tactics, which we will be using every time we play a game of chess. So these are very, very crucial. We will move on to the next ones. Next is the pin and the skewer. Now, the pin and the skewer are sort of similar, but obviously they have their differences. So when we talk about the pin is basically when you're obstructing something from moving. How this works is like, suppose there's a queen over here, knight over here, a bishop over here. Please mute yourself. Mute karo shobai. Yes. So this is called a pin because the knight cannot move. If the knight moves, the bishop takes the queen. If the knight moves anywhere, regardless of where the knight moves, the queen is lost. So this is why the knight can't move, and this is called a pin. The knight is pinned, and the way we take advantage of this is basically we attack the knight which cannot move. We attack this piece. So suppose we ourselves have a knight over here, and we move that knight over here. This knight, although it looks like we have lost this knight can just take. It cannot because it's stuck. It's pinned. So we are applying pressure to this pinned piece. We will see multiple more examples of pins. Pins not only work with bishops, it can work with queen, it can work with the rook. So I'll just give an example. For example, if we have like this. This is also a pin. The knight cannot move regardless of wherever it wants to because the queen is lost. However, this is not an illegal move. If you want, you can play this and lose your queen, of course. However, if instead of the queen there was the king, this becomes an illegal move. You cannot physically remove the knight because after you remove the knight, your king comes under check, and that's illegal. So a piece in front of the king is always pinned. Okay, so it doesn't matter. Even if it's a queen, the queen can take. Suppose the queen can take. If you're the queen cannot move, the queen is pinned. Okay, so whenever there's a lower value piece, in this case the queen is lower value than the king. ঠিক আছে, কুইনের ভ্যালু কিং হচ্ছে সবচেয়ে দামি পিস, এত দাম ওটার কোনো পয়েন্টই নেই। কুইনকে আমরা বলি 9 points, the queen is 9 points, but the king is immeasurable. There's no point system for the king because when you lose the king, it's over. So the king is the most valuable piece. The queen is less valuable than the king. In this case, the queen cannot move because the more valuable piece, in this case, the king, will be in danger. So that is the pin. In reverse, the skewer is exactly the opposite thing. So we saw this, right? This is a pin. The knight is pinned. If the reverse happens, suppose this happens. And in this case, actually, the queen can just capture the bishop. But if the bishop is guarded, then this is a skewer, which means the queen has to move. But when it moves, the piece behind the queen is in danger. So suppose the queen moves over here, the knight is lost. Okay, this works both ways. So as I showed with the is a similar manner. Suppose I give this check. This is also a skewer because the more valuable piece is in front and the more valuable piece has to move. So when it moves, the queen is under attack and the queen can be taken. So this is a skewer. Okay. So and as usual, like before, the skewer can also be done by the rook. The king has to move and the queen is lost. So we will take a look at a few examples like this. This is a very simple skewer position. What we do over here is we see that the queen and the king both are lined up and we give a check. And since it's a skewer, we have to attack the king, the higher value piece, so that the higher value piece has to move and then the lower value piece can be captured. So if we play this, the queen and the king has to move. Wherever it moves, the queen will be taken. So this is a standard simple skewer. Next we move on to this. This is not a skewer because this would have been a pin because the queen cannot move. If the queen moves, it is illegal, it cannot move. If the moves, the king will be under check. So this is a pin, this is not a skewer. And actually, if we play this, the queen can simply take the rook. So not only is it not a skewer, it is a bad move. So we move on to a few more examples. This is also a skewer where the king is in front. We attack the king has to move, and the rook can be taken. This is a skewer. We see a couple more. Let's see how this can be done. I don't think this is the correct move. Is this the correct move? Uh, no. Oh yeah, this is the correct move, but actually, yes. Now we attack both rooks, and as we know, the bishop is of lower value than the rooks. So if we want to take the rooks, this is actually good for us. So the rook has to move over here, and we do this, and this is a skewer because the king has to move, and the rook can be taken. We move on to a bit more complicated. This is actually more of a practical purpose because these skewers, these pins, and the forks, these will happen all the time in our own games. We have to find these, we have to utilize them to gain an advantage. Okay, and we have to make sure that we ourselves don't blunder some stupid mistake. Okay, uh, so first of all, we have to look for a skewer here, and if any of you can spot one, that would be amazing. কেউ কি এখানে বের করতে পারবে স্কিউয়ার কোথায় হচ্ছে দাদা? Okay, since we are starting, I'll just tell it. Okay, over here, what can we see? In this side, the bishop and the rook are lined up, but this won't work because the bishop will simply be taken. Another thing we can see is that the queen and the rook are lined up. This might work. Why? Because after we play this, the queen is attacked and the queen has to move, because obviously you cannot lose a queen to a bishop. So you have to move your queen, which is your most valuable piece, except the king. You move your queen wherever you may move it, and the rook is attacked, so you may capture the rook. This is a standard skewer. So I think it is clear. We will see another example to make whatever we learned absolutely clear. Okay, this is also a bit tricky. It is a bit tricky to find. First, we have to identify what might be our target. So we can see the queen and the king are in one line. However, there is a pawn separating it. So it cannot be our target. However, on this side, we can see a queen and a rook on a single diagonal, and our own bishop is also on that diagonal. So if we simply move the knight, we may move it back or we may move it over here. The queen will be attacked and the queen has to move, and we will win the rook. You may ask why the queen is not simply taking the bishop, because when we move the knight to h4, we are also protecting the bishop. So the queen cannot take the bishop, the queen has to move to protect herself, and we may just win the rook. These are called skewers, and we have to find them in our own games. We have to identify them and use them as much as possible. Moving on, we'll practice the pin. So over here we can see the arrow has already been drawn for us. This is a pin. Quite opposite of a skewer, the pin involves a lower value piece in front of a higher value piece. So the lower value piece is stuck and it cannot move. Now we can take the knight just by itself, and that would be an advantage for us. Moving on, this is more of a practical example. This is in a game, and we see that the rook and the king are lined up on a single diagonal. So, and we see that our bishop is able to attack this rook, and this rook is stuck. It cannot move, because if it moves, the king will be under attack, and that is illegal. So, and now we can just take the rook because nothing is guarding it, and we have gained an advantage. Now we move on to the next example. Over here, it is kind of similar, where the the rook and the queen are lined up on a diagonal, and our black square bishop can take advantage of that. Again, over here, we also see a different application of a pin, because not always can you capture the piece that is pinned, because even though this knight, the knight on e5 is pinned, it cannot move. However, it cannot be taken because the pawn on f6 is backing it up. If we take it, the pawn simply takes back, and that is a loss for us, because a rook is a higher value piece, and we would not want to lose a rook for a knight. Instead, what we do is, as I said earlier, to take advantage of the pin, not directly, but indirectly, and we can do that by pressuring the piece that is under pin. So, although we cannot directly take the knight, what we can do is attack the knight. And the knight cannot move, it cannot move out of the way of the attack of the pawn. Instead, the king has to move so that the knight, for just a second, is free. But that is not enough because we will simply take back, and that is an advantage. So this is how we use the pin. Now over here, this is actually a different kind of pin, and I wanted to show you all this because this is very, very important. So for a pin to occur, it does not always have to be a piece. Okay, it may simply be a thread. So for example, in earlier cases, when we saw uh, a knight being pinned, this is a pin, not because the queen is behind it. It is pinned because when the knight moves, there is a threat that the bishop is taking the queen. Because of this threat, the knight is not being able to move. Similar to that, over here, we do not suppose we see the lines. There is no line in where the queen or the king is behind some minor piece. There is a line over here, but we cannot take advantage of that. Instead, what is there is a threat. What threat is there is we are threatening a mate. Over here on G7, we see that if this knight moves, then we can simply mate, and that would be a checkmate, and the game would be over. So this knight cannot move because if it moves, well, that would be the game would be over. We would be able to checkmate it. So we can simply do this. We can simply take the knight. Another thing we have to realize is that in this position, not one but two pieces are pinned. One is the knight. The knight cannot move. If the knight moves, well, it would be checkmate. It can move to h5, but that is still a problem because in the end, the bishop gets opened up. So the knight cannot move to, let's say, the knight cannot move back, or the knight cannot come to e4. Another thing which is pinned is this pawn on g7. So this pawn cannot move diagonally because the king is behind it. So when we take the knight, the pawn cannot take the bishop because then the king will be under attack, and that is illegal. Let's see another example to make it even more clear. We see it's white turn, and we have to see what is under attack. Well, this knight is under attack because this knight is pinned. Because if we move the knight, the black knight, if it moves, we will take the rook on e8, and that would be a full rook to our advantage. So instead, what we can do is take advantage of this, and as I said, we can put pressure on the knight. So how can we do that? Let's see. We cannot take the knight in this situation because that would be a bad move, because we simply lose a rook for a knight which is down in exchange for us. That is not the way to go. So we will go back and we will think, well, what else can we do? We can try to pressure it from here, and that's turned out to be the right thing, because when we take this pawn, the knight cannot move, the knight cannot take back, because then we will simply take the rook on e8. A counter at and also when we take the pawn, we're also attacking the knight. So the next move, we will also be taking the knight on e6. That is how we take advantage of a pin. It is not always straightforward. We have to think about this a bit. Okay, so this is the right move. The knight moves and we can take the rook for ourselves. Let's see one more example to make it even more clear. Okay, it's white's turn, and from this, from the given position, we can see that this pawn is pinned, right? Because the bishop is attacking the king, and to move this pawn would be illegal. unless it moves in this diagonal, which it cannot. So this pawn is pinned, and now we have to think, well, how can we take advantage of that? A simple pin will be of no use. However, we have to take advantage of the pin. In this situation, we can take advantage of the pin by simply just going straight in. It may look impossible because it may seem like we are just giving up a rook, sorry, giving up our queen, in fact, because this pawn can take us, but it cannot because, well, it is pinned. And now we can mate because our bishop is also very powerful piece. So this is the last problem we will look at. It is black to play. Uh, we can see one very glaring pin, which is over here, where the king and the queen are on the same diagonal. This is not a skewer because the queen is in front of the king, and if it is pinned, the queen will not be able to move. So what instead we can do is take advantage of this, and since the queen in this position, actually the queen can move because, well, it is not yet pinned. The pin is not there because the rook is in the middle. But when we take like this, it is a pin because, well, the king was on the same line, and the queen could not take back. So that was a pin. We just won a pawn because of that. Is there any bigger way to take an advantage? Let's see. See anything? I think that was it. That is how you take the advantage of a pin. Okay. Yes. So that was it. I think I made it clear. If you have any questions, please ask them. We will discuss it in further detail. We will show openings in which the pins come in direct use, and we will solve some more problems. There are a lot of problems on chess, and we will be seeing many of them because we have to master these three simple things as they are very important to how well we can play and how dynamic we can make our game plan. So that was it for today. Uh, I explained the three very crucial yet simple concepts, tactics we may call them, the pins, the forks, and the skewers. Okay, ঠিক আছে, ভালো থেকো সবাই, এখানেই রাখলাম। বাই।